afternoon and welcome to this wonderful event. We're so pleased and excited to be here. We were going to hopefully present you with a very interesting afternoon. My name is Richard Hughes. I'm delighted to be your MC today for this unveiling of the Ontario Heritage Trust plaque commemorating the life and the achievements of our hometown hero, a boy from Belleville who went on to magnificent future, Dr. James Bertram Collip. Now the story of Dr. Collip, his lasting legacy, etc., and his work will be discussed by our guest speakers today. And these will include, and I'll just list them, first of all, his worship, Mayor Ellis, followed by Councillor Garnet Thompson, I mustn't forget that, Councillor Garnet Thompson, the chairman of the Public Library Board. And we also have with us Mr. Don Mann, who is the past chair and the director of the National Board of the Canadian Diabetes Association. And we have a very special speaker following, Dr. George Pierce, who of course needs no introduction to anyone in this room, the very father of the feast, you might say. We also have with us, at the other end of the age spectrum, if I may, George, Mr. Nick Ogden, who is a grade 12 student at St. Paul's Secondary School in Trenton. And the speaker, Mr. Sandy Smallwood, who was a member of the board of the Ontario Heritage Trust. And finally, and certainly, as they say last but certainly not least, Ms. Beth Hanna, who is the executive director of the Ontario Heritage Trust. We would also like to recognize, just briefly before we go forward, the members of the Dr. James B. Collip Recognition Committee, the committee that basically has carried forward the research work of Dr. Pierce, put it into shape and into a program, and was the applicant for this wonderful plaque from the Ontario Heritage Trust. And the members of this, I'll just list the names, are Mrs. Rosalie Spargo, Mrs. Joyce Wardle, Mrs. Kay Manderville, Mrs. Diane Sewell, Mr. Stanley Jones, Dr. Pierce, and myself. This is the committee that has been promoting the recognition of Dr. Collip and will continue to do so in the future. So we'll begin our remarks today by calling upon Beth Hanna, the Executive Director of the Ontario Heritage Trust, who will tell us something about the work of the Trust and will introduce, well, we'll keep that as a surprise.
Thank you, Richard. It's nice to be the one that brings surprises. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I appreciate all of you who are attending today's event. Welcome, bienvenue. I'd also like to recognize the long history of First Nation and Métis peoples of Ontario and bring greetings in the language of the Bay of Quinte, Sego, Bonjour, Bienvenue. The Ontario Heritage Trust is the agency that cares for, commemorates, and shares Ontario's rich and diverse heritage. La fiducie du patrimoine ontarien est l'organisme responsable de la gestion et de la célébration du patrimoine riche et divers de l'Ontario, de même que de la sensibilisation à ce patrimoine. The Trust engages people in the recognition, conservation, and promotion of the province's heritage. A representative, as you heard, a representative of our Board of Directors, Sandy Smallwood, will say more about the Trust's objectives, programs, and projects in a few moments. But if you're not familiar with our work, you may know us as the people behind Doors Open Ontario and the Young Heritage Leaders Awards. I encourage you to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook and visit our website. And you may, if you wish, leave your email address at our booth in the other room. If you'd like to be made aware of future events and activities, I encourage you to do so. Our oldest and perhaps most well-known program, and the reason for today's gathering, is the Provincial Plaque Program. Ontario's provincial plaques enrich our sense of place. They remind communities of and introduce newcomers and visitors to the unique character of our province. And most importantly, they help share our stories. As you know, today we mark the story of James B. Collip, one of Belleville's own, whose legacy has enabled millions around the world to live healthy and productive lives. This particular story is one that many of us might not have had the opportunity to fully appreciate or to know about at all. It's hoped that the provincial plaque to commemorate Collip's life and work will help to change that. The Trust is honored to have had the opportunity to work with Dr. Michael Bliss on this important project. Michael Bliss is a prominent historian and author, most particularly of the discovery of insulin and Banting, a biography. He was for many years a professor of history at the University of Toronto and is an officer of the Order of Canada. An early supporter of this project, we are most fortunate that he was able to write the Collip plaque text, which we'll show you in a little while. Although he sends his sincere regrets that he is unable to join us today, we are grateful that he took the time to record a short video about James Collip, and I'm delighted to share it with you now. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Michael Bliss.
Over 30 years ago, I became interested in researching the discovery of insulin, a project that generated 2 books, The Discovery of Insulin and Banting, a biography. In many ways, the most interesting of the people I came across in that project was James Bertram Collip, J.B. Collip, Bert Collip to his friends. J.B. Collip was a native of Belleville, Ontario, where his father ran a flourishing florist and market gardening business. The greatest adventure in Collip's life came on a traveling fellowship and to work with James J.R. McLeod, the professor of physiology at the University of Toronto, when he formed a passing friendship with Dr. Fred Banting, who had come back to the university with a strange idea for research on diabetes and the pancreas. In December 1921, Professor McLeod invited Collip to work with Banting and Best, who had, for the last few months, been doing really interesting work on the pancreas of diabetic dogs and seemed to have discovered an extract that would enable diabetic dogs to begin functioning normally. Collip threw himself into the diabetes research, and in January 1922, Collip became the first person to produce an extract of pancreas that was clearly and unambiguously successful in treating a human diabetic. Very quickly, the team called their extract insulin. Within a few months, the scientific world was astounded by the potential of insulin to restore the lives and health of children and adults suffering from type 1 diabetes. Collip was a co-discoverer of insulin. Personal relations were deeply strained, and it's really only in the 21st century that we now talk about the 4 discoverers of insulin. And there's no doubt that Collip was the most productive scientist of the insulin team. In 1928, moved from the University of Alberta to McGill, where he was particularly active in developing the early estrogens. It was Collip's lab that produced the first commercial hormones that women used very substantially during menopause. His lab at McGill was Canada's first great scientific research laboratory. Students came from all over the world to work with Dr. Collip. He wound down his research in World War II when he became effectively an administrator in charge of Canadian medical research. He finally wound down his career as Dean of Medicine at the University of Western Ontario from 1947 to 1961. Collip died in London, Ontario in 1965. Looking at his career as a whole, it's hard to see that there were any other scientists of this caliber in Collip's time in Canada. He really was a pioneer in endocrinology, a co-discoverer of insulin, the most productive scientist among the insulin team. Not a flashy person, particularly. Collip was a shy man, very hardworking, kind of driven, especially after the insulin success, when you realized how scientific research could pay off spectacularly.
What a wonderful video. It's, we certainly appreciate Dr. Bliss for his cooperation and for allowing us to make this video. He has promoted Dr. Collip and promoted information on this for many, many years. In fact, his book, I might comment, his book, The Discovery of Insulin, I would highly recommend it as for reading. It sounds like it's maybe a scientific or a technical book, but it's a most excellent, almost a novel, and really a very interesting book. Beth Hannah mentioned one of the projects of the Ontario Heritage Trust being Doors Open Belleville, and Doors Open Ontario. And I would highly recommend you mark on your calendar September 13, which is when we have our doors open in the Quinte area. And I know planning is already going forward on it, so I highly recommend you note September 13 for the doors open in this area. Now, our Member of Parliament, Darrell Cramp, could not be with us today for the very important reason that Parliament is in session. And I guess, I think he'd rather be here, actually. But he did send a note, and he asked us to read it. So it's very short, and I'll just read it as it is. It says, "I would like to offer my sincere regrets at being unable to attend the unveiling of the provincial plaque commemorating Dr. James Bertram Collip. As a pioneer in insulin research, Dr. Collip played a vital role in the discovery of insulin and went on to embark on a long and brilliant career in medical research and education. We in Prince Edward Hastings are justly proud and grateful for the unveiling in Belleville of the commemorative plaque celebrating Dr. Collip's exemplary career," and signed by Darrell Cramp MP. So we're very grateful for our Member of Parliament. I would now like to call upon our Mayor, His Worship, Mayor Ellis, to bring comments on behalf of the municipal government. And I might just digress for 1 second and say that those of us in the heritage and history field of promoting the heritage of our wonderful area, we want to note and appreciate the support and encouragement that has come from Mayor Ellis and from the City of Belleville Council. It's been growing year by year, and it's, as I say, noted and very much appreciated. Mayor Ellis.
Well, thank you, and I guess as I'm getting to be part of history, we as council have to give more time to history. But good afternoon. On behalf of all my colleagues on council, I'm honored to be here today to bring greetings on behalf of the City of Belleville. I'd also like to thank the volunteers, and this recognition has been done by volunteers, brought to council and brought to us. And it's volunteers that bring our community together, and without them, I think a lot of us, including myself, would never know that such great people, we do know that great people live in our city, but it's time to honor some of our great history in our past. The Ontario Heritage Trust Provincial Plaque Program honors very significant people in Ontario's history, and Dr. James Collip is certainly one of them. 8 years as mayor, this is the first Ontario Heritage Provincial Trust Plaque that I have presented, so that, I guess, speaks volumes to not very many are handed out, and I think that this is a handful that we have in our city. So this is the big day, and I am glad that we have a full room to not only honor the event, but to honor our great history of our city as past. As mayor of the city, it's important that such an important individual was born in our city. Dr. James Collip was instrumental on the team to develop insulin for the treatment of diabetes in humans. So many people suffer from diabetes in our community, and insulin is a lifesaver for them every day. To be able to say that someone in Belleville had a hand in improving not only the quality of our citizens, the quality of citizens around the world is a truly amazing, amazing feat, and it's amazing that this all wouldn't have happened, unless, well, would have happened eventually, but to happen from the roots of this city is just incredible. I would like to not only thank the volunteers today to truly to bring this amazing feat forward. I would also like to thank the Ontario Heritage Trust, Canadian Diabetes Association, the Library Board, which I think Councillor Thompson is going to recognize also, and the Dr Collip Recognition Committee. Without all this group working and pushing together, we wouldn't have great events in our city like this. So again, thank you, and let's get on.
Neil's a very fortunate mayor because this city indeed does have an army of wonderful volunteers and people who care a great deal about our home city. So maybe that makes the office of mayor a little bit easier.
Definitely.
And more difficult to leave. Now I'd like to call on the chairman of the library board, this excellent facility. As you look around, what finer facility could we have for a ceremony with beautiful artwork, among other things. So I'd like to call upon Councillor Garnet Thompson.
Thank you very much, folks, for coming out for a very memorable day in our city. First off, on behalf of the library board, which we have a couple of our members are here, I want to thank the Ontario Heritage Trust, the James Collip Recognition Committee, Hastings County Historical Society, Richard Hughes, Dr. George Pierce, and the Canadian Diabetes Association, and also for the library and the staff, naming a couple, just Trevor and Holly, and other ones that have been taken in getting this facility ready today. It's fantastic that this city has the opportunity to house this plaque on this beautiful facility down in our courtyard, which is only 6 or 7 years old, and now we'll have a plaque down there that people will be able to recognize. It is a privilege to have the plaque displayed on the library property, and is important timing as we progress to the move of the archives into the library, where people will be able to come and view the plaque and also find out more history on the insulin development and the history of Dr. Collip. As this library on a normal given day usually gets 800 to 1,000 people in through its doors. So this plaque is going to get well recognized each and every day, which Dr. Collip well deserves. As a coincidence, Dr. Collip, the first person that was saved by insulin, just happens to be named Thompson. Not that my name isn't a good name, but when you think of the history of the Thompsons and who that person has been able to save over the years, I'm going to pay tribute to Dr. Collip, even for that absence of using Thompson as the first person they saved. Again, on behalf of the library board and the staff, it's been pleased to be chosen as the site as a very important plaque for a very important person that has made such a tremendous impact on the health in the past and will continue in the future, making an impact on our future, our health of our people. So on behalf of my library board staff, our library board members, and fellow councillors and the mayor, it is a privilege to be able to unveil this plaque on our property so people will recognize somebody that has such an influence in our community. So on behalf of myself and everybody else, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. While we are talking about library staff, I must underline and emphasize something that Garnet said. Trevor Cross, the CEO of the library, and Holly Dewar, the manager of public services, have worked very, very hard in amazing cooperation to make this event together. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with them on the whole thing. From the day we came forward and said, could we possibly have this plaque on this location, the enthusiasm was absolutely 100%. So we're really deeply appreciative of the library board and the library management. It's a fine, fine team. Now, it's almost humbling to introduce the next speaker, who is Dr. George Pierce. Before George comes up, I want to say that I can, with absolute confidence and say very proudly, if it were not for the extensive research and the determined efforts of Dr. George Pierce, we simply would not be here today. It's as simple as that. This would never have happened, and the people would never have come to know Dr. Collip. Dr. Pierce saw that the medical, the academic work, they were quite well acquainted with the achievements of Dr. Collip. But among the broad population, and certainly in the streets of his hometown, he was basically totally unknown. So Dr. Pierce took on this challenge. He set out to correct the situation. He worked hard, he traveled, he gathered information, and he brought it to the Historical Society, he brought it to Heritage Belleville, we brought it to City Council. Everyone bought into the idea, and because of the work of Dr. Pierce, we're here today, and it's a glorious day. George, would you come forward? Here, here.
Well, I'll start by saying that as I recollect things, insulin has been Canada's gift to the world. I'm not supposed to speak too long, so I'm cutting away things inside. But actually, I'll say that Dr. Collip's parents were married January 25th at St. Thomas Church. He was born about a year later and attended school near their property in Thurlow. In the newspaper in 1904, there were the results of the entrance examinations, and his examination result was 715, and there were 187 people trying the test, and the top mark was 7 above his. So that kind of gets him rolling in the high school. We don't have too many remnants or marks recorded from our high school, but he was ready to go to high school about 1908. And he had luck in the family. Their farm had been along a railway line, and the Grand Trunk Railway paid them $1,000 for an extra slip of land to put in another rail line. So that had them in a good position to deal with the representative of Trinity College when they came to Belleville. So Dr. Collip went to Trinity College, and he had his religious education augmented, and he took the streetcars to the downtown university so he could take science classes. It was a new course, and it was provided by an Archibald McCallum, who went on to become head of the biochemical department at McGill University. So things are moving around quite a bit, and Dr. Collip graduated from University of Toronto with a BA, an MA, and a PhD by 1916. And he had been approached by a Dr. Moshier of the University of Alberta because Dr. Moshier felt an obligation to serve as the head of the 11th Field Ambulance of the Canadian Forces. Sadly, Dr. Mosher was killed overseas. Dr. Collip just became busier and busier because as some of the senior men left, the weight was on him to give increased lecture time. He managed. In the summer, he and his family went to Departure Bay near Nanaimo in British Columbia so that he could assist with some Dominion Marine Biology Service work. So that was quite an expansion for his career. In 1920, the president of the university, Henry Marshall Torrey, said, well, the war is over now. We can get somebody more senior and more experienced than Collip. What a terrible thought. At any rate, that word got to Collip, so fortunately he's a person not to say too much. At any rate, the president of the university tried to smooth things over by arranging to give Collip funds for a sabbatical year. So that settled things down for the moment, and Collip went to, had plans to go to Toronto, New York, and London, England. So Toronto first, and while he was there, he ran into Frederick Banting by chance and offered to help as Banting was starting a research project on the pancreas. Because back in 1889, two doctors in Strasbourg, France, Winkowski and von Mering, had determined that if you remove the pancreas, diabetes develops. So the conclusion from that is it must be something in the pancreas that prevents diabetes. I think that Banting wanted to go on his own for a while, and so Collip carried on with his plans, and he pursued marine biology. He went to Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and to the biology station at St. Andrews on the Sea. And so when it was fall, it was time for him to return to the University of Toronto. By this time, the person in charge of Banting Best and so on was getting a little frustrated to think that, well, if they didn't produce something pretty well, then what would happen to their budget? And at any rate, Collip was asked to work on the purification of the pancreas substances. So that went very well. He started that early in December, and by about the 19th of January, he had a pure form of animal insulin that could be used for humans. So that was a remarkable time. And the Thompson fellow, he got his share. The next thing was, at the time, the gentleman didn't get along too well, so Collip was quite happy to get back home because his daughter wasn't all that well. He had a daughter born in 1921 and a grandfather killed in 1921 by a rail accident. So he's back working in the University of Alberta, and then eventually he decides in 1928 to take a position in McGill because his former teacher, we talked about in the beginning, Archibald McCallum, was retiring. So off he went to McGill, and things just got better and better. The department membership went from about 5 or 10 up to 30, and it was a wonderful situation. Then sadly the war came about, so some things stopped and some things started. He was Canada's liaison for military medicine to the United Kingdom and to America. He did very well, and over the years he was able to be a pioneer in the discovery of endocrine substances. And on return from Toronto, he started a project and developed the parathyroid hormone. Subsequent to that, when he was in McGill, he developed reproductive system hormone extracts and adrenal, cortical, and pituitary extracts. He wasn't really in agreement with all the changes at McGill that were taking place in the 1945-46. So he decided to take a position at the University of Western Ontario, where he took the position as Dean of Medicine and Director of Medical Research. To speak about him as a person, he was quite a quiet person, and yet very dedicated to his family, very dedicated to mankind, and I couldn't say much more about him. I noticed in the book that was on Michael Bliss' lap, it was Allison Lee's book. And could you stand up just for a second, Allison? She has a wonderful book on the biography of James Bertram Collip. Also, I can go the other side of Michael Bliss. See, Michael Bliss is much younger than I am, and an earlier medical biographer, G. Lloyd Stevenson, wrote a book titled Sir Frederick Grant Banting. And on about page 251 in that book, it says that of these people, Best, Banting, Collip, and MacLeod, if they were likened to an arch, Collip would be the keystone. Thank you very much.
James Collip with his mom and dad. And they, in modern terms, they lived at the corner of Elmwood Drive and Airport Parkway. They were there. They had a little 10-acre vegetable farm. So he would have sold veggies on the Belleville Market, just down the street here, helping out his family. And the other picture, of course, is in their spiffy new car on Front Street with mom, dad, sister, and an aunt. I've often been tempted to take a walk down Front Street and try to place that. I'm sure it's still there. Now, it's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Don Mann, who is the past chair and the past director and is currently a volunteer director with the Canadian Board of the Canadian Diabetes Association. Now, more than most, Don Mann and the people that work and serve and volunteer at the Canadian Diabetes Association, they understand very much the impact of Dr. Collip's work, as they work tirelessly to assist people living with diabetes to lead a full and productive life right across our great country. So we very much appreciate their work. Don Mann, please.
Thank you very much, Richard, for your remarks. And I want to state first off that I do represent the Canadian Diabetes Association. And on behalf of people that are here today, there are volunteers, there are staff members from CDA in Kingston and Belleville, and many thousands, in fact, of volunteers across the country that are really trying to live out the mission of the Canadian Diabetes Association, and that is to improve the health of people with diabetes while we work to find a cure. Now, you probably have heard the term that insulin might have been a cure. It was construed at the time and considered in its infancy that it was the cure. Well, wasn't really a cure, it was a treatment. And to echo Richard's comments about it being, that is insulin being the gift that Canada gave to the world, is certainly uppermost in our minds. It has saved insulin, and the work of Collip, Banting, Best, and McLeod in providing insulin has also provided life to millions of people, literally millions of people around the world. So I want to bring you greetings from the National Board of Canadian Diabetes Association. I'm very pleased to have been asked to come here to do that and to be part of this great, great celebration. We are really with you, and we understand that fully that you want to honor somebody like Dr. James B. Collip. I got to say also that although I was noted as a past chair and past director, I am past chair and I am a director, and my wife might say, well, you're a director with a past too. Be that as it may. But I owe really the fact of being here to one person, Rosalie Spargo, standing over on the side there, who told me about Collip, I don't know how many years ago, 5 or 10 years ago. And I did not even at that time appreciate the fact that Collip was one of the famous people in that famous group of 4 people that are co-discoverers of insulin. The discovery of insulin was truly a wonderful discovery. It gave faith and hope to people that had diabetes. In fact, they needed insulin or they would have died. It's just about that simple. So it has saved the lives of millions of people around the world. And I want you to know that the Canadian Diabetes Association congratulates you on keeping this story of Collip alive and foremost in our minds. A great Canadian, and I read somewhere a Belleville hero, and he certainly was that. Now, I've only been given a few minutes, but I must tell you that when Rosalie asked me on behalf of the committee to say a few words on behalf of CDA, I consulted our curator in London, Ontario. Grant Maltman is the curator of Banting House National Historic Site in London, which is called the birthplace of insulin, where Banting started his work, and he was quite anxious to send something to me. So if I may, I'm just going to read this to you. James, this is from Grant Maltman, our curator at Banting House in London. James Bert Collip had already returned to the University of Alberta, having completed his sabbatical at the University of Toronto, when it was announced that the 1923 Nobel Prize in Physiology of Medicine had been awarded to Frederick Banting and John McLeod. Now, I'm going to be repeating maybe a few things that the good doctor has already said in his illuminating address, but if I'm repeating anything, it only tends to underline and reinforce the importance of why we're here today. So, the Nobel Prize went to 2 people rather than 4, and that created quite a stir. Collip would make his first public comment, shyly, 1 week later, after McLeod announced that Collip indeed had agreed to accept half of his share of the prize money. So Collip did get something out of it, apart from the obvious recognition. The Nobel Committee really struggled with the Banting and McLeod nominations. Unlike Charles Best's contribution to the research, Collip's contributions to the research were often referenced in the discussions, attempting to apportion credit for the discovery of insulin. And as one of the judges said, there is reason for specially mentioning the chemist J.B. Collip. He has made a very important contribution in the method of producing insulin. Well, as previously stated, They were having problems with the first administering of insulin. It was impure, and in some cases did a great deal for the person, in some cases didn't make them any better at all. So Collip's job was to purify the insulin to the point where it could be safely injected into human beings and they would get a new life. He stressed that the successful research was a team effort, this is Collip's words, and humbly offered to one reporter, and again this is a quotation from Collip, Dr. J.B. Collip, the part which I was able to contribute subsequently to the work of the team was only that which any well-trained biochemist could be expected to contribute. A pretty lowly, humble statement, a guy that was a genius and gave us the great gift. And he says, and I was indeed very, very trivial by comparison to some of the other people that were doing the research. Later in life, he refused to get involved in discussions over credit for the discovery of insulin or share his opinions on the controversy. There was some controversy. This is a momentous discovery. With a lack of public awareness of his involvement, while the lack of public awareness of his involvement remained minimal in his lifetime, the same could not be said within the medical community, who really knew and understood what he had done. Satisfied with the historical record being exactly what it was, he became a pioneer of endocrine research, served as the chair of the Department of Biochemistry at McGill, and concluded his career as the Dean of Medicine at Western. So all these things are something for our heritage, and I really want to say again how wonderful it is that we're at this point where we can actually give credence and credit to a magnificent person. This book was mentioned, and I commend it to you. The Discovery of Insulin, I meant to check in the library down below before I came in if they have a copy there. But if you are a student of insulin, perhaps it is, I don't know. If you are a student of insulin, a student of Collip and all the co-discoverers, read this book. As Richard said, it reads like a novel. It is absolutely fantastic. So thanks again, everybody. Really have enjoyed this day, and I wish you all the best in the future.
When we think of the medical research, we think of a sterile laboratory and all the equipment and the things boiling. Don't forget, Dr. Collip went to the abattoirs of Toronto and extracted pancreas out of dead cattle. He chopped it up, cooked it up, and worked from that. So you could imagine, going through the entrails of cattle at the abattoirs in Toronto and pulling off their pancreas, whatever it looks like. So it was more than just the sterile receiving it because his lab coat and all that. He was also up to his ankles in cows. Now, our next speaker is a very special person, and he has a very, very deep personal reason to appreciate the work and the achievement of Dr. Collip. Nick Ogden is a grade 12 student, graduating this year from St. Paul's Secondary School in Trenton, and Nick has lived with type 1 diabetes for a number of years now. So we're going to call on Nick, if you will, come forward and...
Thank you very much, Richard. Before I start, I would just like to again say how absolutely honored I am to be asked to speak here today among this amazing lineup of guests and dignitaries. I really appreciate it, so thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to all the distinguished guests that have joined us today. Like Richard said, my name is Nicholas Ogden, and I will be speaking about what life is like living as an insulin-dependent type 1 with diabetes. Looking back on May 17th, 2007, my life changed before I knew it. Never in a million years did I imagine having to take 5 needles a day in order to live my life. Now, 7 years later, I am in full control of my diabetes and living my life like any other person. The advancements in technology has made it incredibly easy to manage and maintain excellent sugar levels. I have since upgraded from 5 needles a day to once every 3 days by switching from needles to the insulin pump. This change has made it even easier to control my disease. None of this, however, would be possible if it weren't for the efforts made by Dr. Banting and Dr. James B. Collip, specifically the work of Dr. Collip, who made insulin safe for human use. As someone who is unable to produce insulin, this has made the dream of being as normal as possible a reality. And to think that someone from Belleville has made this possibly the greatest medical advancement used by millions living with diabetes around the globe. I guess that goes to show that the smallest of cities can produce greatness. Looking back over the last 7 years of my life, living with diabetes hasn't been so bad. With what is offered to me, to people like me, from the tools to the amazing help offered to hospitals around the world, and specifically the help at Belleville General Hospital, if I can give a shout out, diabetes has gone from a disease that controls your life to a disease that is controlled in life. I want to personally thank everyone here today, as well as those who could not join us, for their incredible work to improve the lives of people like me living with diabetes. I can only hope to one day be able to repay the diabetes community and give back all I have received in support. Thank you for your time, and thank you to Dr. James Collip for giving me a fighting chance to make a change in this world like he has.
Well done. Boy, sometimes we older folks worry about the next generation, and then you meet somebody like Nick and you say, no, it's okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nick. And it's, we've heard many directions, many angles on the achievements of Dr. Collip today. We have one more speaker, Mr. Sandy Smallwood, who was a board member of the Ontario Heritage Trust, and he will bring us greetings on behalf of the board, and will then, as I understand it, take over for the actual unveiling ceremony. So, Sandy.
Thank you, Richard. It's my great pleasure to be here today and to bring greetings on behalf of our chair, Professor Thomas Simons, and my fellow board members fellow directors of the board of the Ontario Heritage Trust. The Ontario Heritage Trust was established in 1967 as the province's heritage agency, entrusted with identifying, preserving, protecting, and promoting Ontario's rich and varied heritage for the benefit of present and future generations. The important work is accomplished through conservation of cultural and natural heritage properties, archaeological artifacts, and historical collections. But as you've heard, the Trust is about much more than preservation of heritage assets. The Trust is an active center and resource for heritage information and education. We develop and deliver programs that engage people of all ages and backgrounds in the recognition and celebration of our province's rich and diverse heritage. I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you about the Trust's public programs for 2014, which are commemorating the centennial of the outbreak of the First World War. We're exploring the way that this global conflict changed Ontario through Doors Open Ontario, museum programming, provincial plaques, and our magazine, Heritage Matters. We hope you'll explore your community on September 13th during Doors Open Belleville, Quinte West, and Prince Edward County. With more than 1,250 provincial plaques across the province, the Trust helps Ontarians understand their past and makes it relevant for today and carry it forward into the future. In 1971, the Ontario Heritage Trust unveiled a plaque to the discovery of insulin at the University of Toronto. Here in Belleville, there are 8 of these familiar blue and gold provincial plaques. Some of the stories shared in these plaques include Belleville City Hall, Sir Mackenzie Bowell, the Ontario School for the Deaf, and the formation of the Methodist Church. The plaque we unveiled today commemorates the life and work of Dr. James B. Collip. As we've heard, Collip had an impressive career in scientific research, teaching, and writing. He is recognized as a world-renowned leader, a pioneer in endocrinology, In addition to these impressive accomplishments, Collip successfully isolated the first insulin suitable for use on human beings. At just 29 years of age, he managed to do this within an incredible 44-day period. Collip wrote of his accomplishment on January 16, 1922. I experienced then and there, all alone, on the top story of the old pathology building, perhaps the greatest thrill which has ever been given me to realize. 92 years later, his thrilling scientific breakthrough continues to bring hope and good health to millions. How fortunate and grateful we are. It is now my pleasure to invite the platform party to join me in unveiling the Ontario Provincial Plaque to James Bertram Collip.
James Bertram Collip, 1892 to 1965. A co-discoverer of insulin, J.B. Bert Collip, was one of Canada's most prolific medical researchers in the first half of the 20th century. Born and raised in Belleville, Collip received a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Toronto in 1916. There, on leave from the University of Alberta in 1921, Professor J.J.R. MacLeod invited him to work with Frederick Banting and Charles Best on a substance they hoped could treat diabetes. In 1922, Collip produced the first insulin suitable for use on human beings, an essential contribution to a treatment that has since saved millions of lives. In 1923, Collip received from MacLeod a share of the Nobel Prize money awarded to Banting and MacLeod for the discovery of insulin. In Alberta and then at McGill University, Collip became internationally known for his leadership in endocrinology. From 1941 to 1945, he headed Canada's wartime medical research. He finished his career as Dean of Medicine at the University of Western Ontario, 1947 to 61, and died in London, Ontario in 1965. Ladies and gentlemen, the provincial plaque to James Bertram Collip.
Now this plaque will be permanently installed here on the grounds, as you know, of the library. It basically at the corner of Campbell Street and Pinnacle Street, so that the story of Dr. Collip can be seen by visitors for years to come. As the chairman of the board pointed out, between 800 and 1,000 people per day, which might be a surprise to many of us, that's a very large number, will pass by this. And I can tell you that by the end of this year, with the opening of the community archives in this building, that number will grow even more. More and more people passing by this very plaque, and it's magnificent. It just makes our hearts jump to see it. I want to thank all of our partners who have worked on this, certainly the committee, the James B. Collip Recognition Committee. This is phase one. We'll move into phase two right away, and that you'll hear about in the future. I'd like to thank the Ontario Heritage Trust. What can we say? We applied, we made our case, and they said, brilliant idea. We said, it is. But no, the Ontario Heritage Trust has been wonderful. We've been working hand in hand with them over the last several months. A wonderful, wonderful organization to work with, and we appreciate so much what you do. Before I do forget, when you arrived, you heard the beautiful music of the piano wafting through the building. We'll have a little bit more afterwards. I want to thank Mr. Luke Bell, who has provided this. Talented pianist, and we're so fortunate to have him. And a very special thanks, as I mentioned earlier, to Trevor Pross and to Holly Dewar of the library, the physical work they've done, the sound system, the lights, everything. Now, the important part, here's the second part. We have refreshments, we have food and drink, and we hope you'll all stay. This will be served in the third gallery, and you can, of course, move around with it. But very importantly, there is a cake here. We hope, as we break up, please come forward, you know, look at the plaque, read the plaque, touch the plaque, and you can look and read the cake too, but don't touch it. But we have a beautiful cake here. Please stay, socialize, enjoy the rest of the afternoon, meet the folks from the Ontario Heritage Trust and our other distinguished guests. Have some cake and food and drink. Thank you so much for coming, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.
They used to give the prisoners rifles so they could go out.
I don't know. They're right here. Photographing the photographers. You don't see every day?
No. It's a procession, a plaque procession. Thanks, Dennis. All right. I don't mind the rest. Okay, go for it. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be lovely. Thank you.
Tall one up here. Mind yourself there, Oscar.
Yep, that's it, Wayne. Okay.
Teamwork.
That's a good photo. Wayne? Oh, yeah.
And one more, please. Nobody move. Photo one.